Hello and welcome to this special segment of Arizona Today. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and this is a special segment because we're in Sedona, Arizona. Now, for those of you in North Carolina and other places, you've probably been to Sedona. It's a beautiful Red Rock area, and it's north of Phoenix, and it's north of Prescott, where I live. And so why are we in Sedona? Well, we're in Sedona because we're holding a second mayor's forum. And in this room, are mayors and county supervisors and other dignitaries that will have a lot to say and a lot to share about the problem we're facing, at least in Arizona and most likely in some other states. The problem, the challenge is bed and breakfasts. There are 91 cities in Arizona. 40 of them that I'm aware of are having some very serious problems now because of the bed and breakfast issue. They're having employee issues. They're having school issues, they're having economic issues. And today, you're going to hear from some very subject matter specialists who are mayors and other key individuals in their communities who are having to address these issues. So thank you for joining us. And I believe you're going to be not just entertained, and I mean that with a small e, but I think you're going to be absolutely informed. So may I begin by having our host, the mayor of Sedona, Arizona, Scott Japple, come up. And Mayor, if you'll join me and go ahead and begin your presentation. Now, the mayor got a hold of me several months ago. Doesn't matter how long, several months, just say yes. Several months ago, and time flies. And he shared with me and with Senator Fincham, who you'll meet in several minutes, the problem you're having in Sedona with the bed and breakfast issue. And probably like many people, I had no idea there was a problem, and nor did I know the problem was as large as you shared with us. And from that meeting came a couple of other meetings, and then came the first mayor's forum, which we held in Prescott. And we had 7 mayors and a city manager. And then we had a mayor or two sit in the front row because they were brand new mayors. And from that meeting has now come this very important meeting where we have additional mayors and county supervisors and assessors. And today, the mayor is going to share what you shared in Prescott about the problems that you're experiencing as the chief executive officer. But then today, ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to hear are other mayors and other officials who are going to also share candidly, not politically correct, but candidly, the problems they're experiencing in their community. So Mayor, thank you for hosting us, and the microphone's yours.
Thank you very much.
Are you good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, folks, thank you all for coming. The first time, as Lyle said, the first meeting that we had in February, we had a total of 8 attendees. Now, because having more mayors of interest, county supervisors, and assessors, we're 22. And I expect this issue to be growing in interest across the state, and I would welcome anybody who wishes to join us in the future to contact me. Thank you all again for coming. You're seeing this map here, and this is a very impactful map. I'm sure your cities and towns of the mayors, and even the counties, have similar issues of short-term rentals in their communities. Sedona is of a position we were able to compile this. Fortunately, we have some GIS people and staff that were able to get all the information. But we were under the impression, moving forward, that we had an inventory of 18% being short-term rentals. And you say that's quite high. But if you'll notice there's certain areas here where there's no green dots. Well, those are the HOA areas. They're not required to have short-term rentals by state statute. So if you took those out of the neighborhoods that allow short-term rentals, the 18% goes to 25%. Staggering. And then we do know that some subdivisions, amongst themselves, it's north of 30%. How would you feel having 30% or 25% or even 18% of your housing in your communities I think you'd be as annoyed as I am. Now, through these forums and through these meetings, we've learned that it's not just lack of housing. For us, it's workforce housing, market rate housing, any type of housing where people can actually move in and live and retire. You're going to hear a mayor of Williams talk about losing Section 8 housing. I'm very proud Jeannie Kench is going to talk about another issue that she's been working on that we didn't know about until just recently, of how short-term rentals are affecting Mojave County. And then we have Alex Baxter, who is the mayor of Jerome, and she has her own story to share. You really want to listen to all of these people, all these mayors talk about, and the county assessor talk about the issues, how it's impacting our state as a whole. So while I understand that we are a property rights state, but what about the property rights of the remaining people? We're losing neighborhoods. Look at this. Okay, this is my neighborhood here. Very few people actually live here anymore. We don't have neighbors anymore. We have hotel rooms. We have nice houses. Yes, they're being well kept. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of trash and those issues, but there's no place for people such as myself and people such as you to retire and move to Sedona. And I'm sure that you're experiencing the same problems. So, let's see. Again, with the property rights state, but you know, the people who support short-term rentals talk about, well, I have the right to do what I want with my property, and you can't tell me what to do. But along comes the community, and you think you have a property right, but you also have a right to be a part of a community. What is your home worth if you don't have schools? What is your home worth if you have nobody else there? Is it really worth something except as a hotel? So I believe in property rights just like everybody else does. However, to what cost? So, you know, it's interesting. We found out when we did our community plan recently that we were not allowed to have the public vote on our community plan because we were below 100,000 residents. How much? 10,000. Makes more sense, thank you. 100,000, okay? So think about that. We as a city believe in public input. We wanted to create a plan, and we wanted the public to vote. We were not allowed to let the public vote. Makes no sense to us. And we had some legislation posed. I think Selena Bliss was, you know, who's our representative, she's in the audience, and I'm very proud to say she stood up with us, and she pushed out legislation, right, Selena, that was one of yours? 3 times. Right, 3 times, okay? 3 times, we wanted our public to vote, we were not allowed. What kind of democracy is that? It bothers me. So, so Al, if you want to put up the next slide. I think you'll find this interesting. Any of the mayors in the counties been pushed by homelessness in your communities? Well, that's the state stats on homelessness across the state. Look at that number there. You notice homelessness was dropping until here, when 1350 went into play in 2017. It's not dropping anymore. Now, I don't think that short-term rentals are the only cause of homelessness at all. But the question should be asked, and it should be studied. And we have a lot of homeless in Sedona and the Verde Valley that now it's causing us to expend a lot of resources for police and other resources. So I'll stop for now, Lyle, and then you can move on. I'll come back and add some in a little bit. Thank you all again.
Let me ask the mayor a couple of questions. My understanding is that you and other mayors are experiencing problems retaining or even getting teachers, grade school teachers. Why?
Well, there's no place for them to live. Even in the Verde Valley, it's a challenge. It's well known that in Arizona, they don't pay the teachers a lot of money. You would think where I'm from, especially on the East Coast, they pay their teachers a lot because that's how you raise children, right? You want them to have the best teachers. I don't know what they're believing in the state, but they don't want to pay teachers who will help mold these children. But they don't pay them a lot, so they certainly can't live in Sedona, and they can't really live in some of the other cities and towns in the Verde Valley. And if they can't go to the Verde Valley, they're driving way too far. You know, we're landlocked in the Verde Valley. We don't have a lot of options. We have a lot of caring cities and towns and the counties that care, but once you go below Camp Verde, or once you go, you know, a lot of people come from Flagstaff, but they're not going to go up to Williams and commute every day. So that's one of the problems. We don't have affordable housing.
Now, my understanding also is that you're not able to get nurses because, again, there's no place for them to live.
Right.
Police and fire, again, no place to live. Okay. So this is something else that we're going to explore today, not just in Sedona, but with other mayors. I believe the mayors that I met at the last forum, I was startled at the reports that echoed what we just said and the impact on their communities. Schools, they had to cancel a couple of classes and combine them because there was no teachers. That
Well,
ring a bell?
Lyle, one thing to also add, not only are there not teachers, but in Sedona, the long-term rentals is where our workers lived. Well, workers equate to family. Without family, you have no children to go to our schools. So that in itself is a problem. We don't have students. We don't have teachers. Now, some may say, okay, so you close the school. I don't believe in that. And I don't think there's anybody in this room that would believe in closing a school. But it's a very diverse area up here. So.
And one of the controversial, sensitive issues that I heard from you and a couple of mayors is that if you did hire a nurse, teacher, there was no place for them. They accepted the contract. They came to start school in August, let's say, but then they found out by surprise there was no place to live. And correct me, they were living in their car for a little bit.
That's true.
And I heard this from a couple of other mayors. And of course, that didn't last very long. The teachers, they quit or they resigned and moved someplace else, correct?
That's correct.
Very serious issues. Anything else for this time?
Nope. I'm good for now. I
You're
know
good?
some other very impactful people. I can't wait to hear them speak again.
Thank you very much. This next mayor, I again met at the forum in Prescott, and this is unique. I'm looking at the mayor, I'll probably get in trouble, but she grew up in her community. She lives in the same home now that she lived with her mom and growing up, and she's become the mayor of Jerome, Arizona. Jerome was founded in, boy, I'm going to get this wrong, maybe I'll be on report, 1876. Am I close, Mayor? Hey, thank you, I studied. 1876. Now, for those of you back east and around the nation watching this, Jerome really is a mining town, and they call it a ghost town because it has a very rich history in both areas. But what I asked this mayor to share with us today, as the mayor of this town, she is, and correct me, Mayor, come on up, but she is facing the closing of her town. I'm not making this up. I only learned this the other day. You didn't share it with me when we had our mayors forum the first time. This is a really neat mayor. Not that the others aren't that great, but I'm not politically correct. But Alex Barber, Mayor Barber, is the mayor of Jerome, Arizona, and it was my privilege to meet her at the first mayor's forum and have fun, and she put up with me. But I just learned, and you and I texted last night or the night before, I did not know you were facing the closing of Jerome. That's a real possibility, and that's your hometown. You were born and raised there, and you're the mayor. And so I asked the mayor, would she share with you openly, candidly, not politically correct, folks, and for those of you watching us across the country, this may be shocking, but I have to tell you, I understand in my little research that other states are beginning to have the same problem that Arizona is just now addressing. That other states are experiencing a bed and breakfast problem, and neighborhoods are being evacuated. So I asked this mayor if she would come, take a deep breath, and be candid as the mayor, chief executive officer, but also what she's facing over there. So thank you for taking time out and joining us.
Thank you. And a little clarification, a bed and breakfast is usually owner-owned and occupied, so you have some checks and balances. A short-term
Did I do it wrong?
rental is sometimes not even owned by someone that lives in Jerome. So I think my cup's a little bit half full than the closing of Jerome. I firmly believe that if we have 200 or 250 people that are willing to volunteer for the town of Jerome, it will live on. So the town of Jerome was founded in 1876. It was incorporated in 1899. We became a National Historic Landmark in 1966. 50 years later, we celebrated our 50 years as a National Historic Landmark. That was back in 2017. So according to the last census, Jerome had about 460 people that lived there. According to Sedona's emergency housing resolution, they came up with a number of 363. The council is all volunteer. The planning and zoning, the design review, the board of adjustment, all volunteers. Our fire department has 3 or 4 paid staff. We have anywhere between 5, 10, and 15 volunteers. So if you get a call, you're an EMT in Jerome, and you're a volunteer firefighter, but you don't live in the town, who shows up to actually put boots on the ground when something happens? Usually 3, 4, 5 different people. We're a little bit different than all the other municipalities because we don't have schools. Jerome shares a school with Clarkdale Jerome School. Mingus Union High School, that's where our kids have to go to school. That's over an hour bus ride from Jerome, Arizona for a high school student to go to Mingus Union High School. So I'm gonna throw out a few facts. One more before I start with the facts. Jerome is the second smallest town in all of Arizona. Winkleman has 294 people. It's the only one smaller than Jerome. The average household size in Jerome is 1.57 persons. The average family size in Jerome is 2.31 persons. Same size homes housing the average family has short-term rental occupancy of 7 persons. 12% of Jerome's single-family housing stock are short-term rentals. 52% of those owned by people residing outside of Jerome. 20% of those owned by people living out of the state. The 12% of housing stock being short-term rentals significantly reduces the candidate pool of potential volunteer, part-time firefighters, EMTs, which has a major detrimental impact on the safety and welfare of the residents and visitors of Jerome. Jerome has different residential zoning, commercial zoning, and industrial zoning. In the commercial area, that is where we have hotels. To have a bed and breakfast in Jerome in a residential area, you had to get a conditional use permit. In, I think it was 2015, the council, I think Supervisor Nikki Check was the mayor of the town of Jerome. They worked on a little bit of tweaking to the Jerome zoning ordinance and tried to add vacation rentals in as a conditional use permit. There was a petition that was signed from a lot of Jerome people that live in Jerome, and they asked to not do this and take it to the voters of Jerome. So in the results of the primary election held on August 26, 2014, 41% of the voters in Jerome said yes, they would like to add that into the ordinance. 117 people said no. A former zoning administrator of the town of Jerome tried to enforce our zoning code and gave out a list of regulations for already operating short-term rentals. We had probably 7 to 10 at that point. Now we have anywhere between 26 and 30 vacation rentals in the town of Jerome. The town of Jerome has purchased 2 residences to actually house department heads, firefighters, police. Our retired police chief of 25 years gave us a sweet deal on his home so we could put our new chief of police in Jerome. Years ago, all the department heads had to live in Jerome to be a department head and work, hold that title. We have slowly but surely taken away 3 of those. We still have 2. Does everyone in this room agree that your chief of police and your fire chief need to reside in the town? So if you have your public works chief, 15 minutes within the town of Jerome is where he lives, he resides. We changed that. You can't find anywhere to live. The apartments that were housing the majority of the people in Jerome, the man died. It went up for sale. It was purchased in 2017 for $1.45 million. It's up for sale for $4 million with the listing saying you can raise rents, you can do all these things. It just is not good for Jerome. Jerome was built before the automobile, so when you take a 4-story home or a 3-story home, or even a 2-story home, and you have it residential, you have mom and pop that live there, they know the neighborhood, they know where to park. Being in a town that was built before the automobile, parking is very limited. So getting creative to try to figure out how the people that live in the homes can actually park near their homes. We've made a lot of the streets residential parking only, where you have to actually have a little tag in your car designating that you live on that street. In the one home that the town bought, our zoning administrator was living in. In the police chief's home, we have our police chief and we have another police officer living there. Mingus Union High School last year dropped Jerome off of the bus route because they didn't have enough bus drivers. To go to bat for a school bus to come up to Jerome to pick up about 5 people was a hard pill to swallow. They did renew our bus route, and we do have a bus that comes up to pick up our high school students now because they did fill enough positions with bus drivers that they were able to do that. For a few months, the town of Jerome, one of the employees, would drive the few children from Jerome down to the number 1 to be picked up with from the high school bus. Families, children, they're non-existent in Jerome at this point. We could probably count all of the children under 18 on this many hands in the town of Jerome. So I'm going to go from the town of Jerome to the state. The Neighborhood Alliance handed out some information. I think her name is Susan Edwards, if I'm correct. Thank you, Susan, for what you do. This is a little bit of information about Arizona as a whole. 1.062 billion loss annually in Arizona federal funds each year due to transient visitors in STRs instead of residents in homes. 80 million annual tax loss. The average STR with transient visitors pays at least $11,050 less in TPT than the average resident living in the same house would pay in individual income taxes. Small town takeovers. STRs make up 17.75% of Sedona's housing stock and 16% of Williams' housing stock. That's according to the city of Sedona. Jerome is at about 12%. Thank you. Please. Those are Lyle's words, not mine. When I had a sit down with the mayor of Sedona, Scott, he told me when he has people visiting in town, he brings them to Jerome. He does Christmas shopping in Jerome. He said he told me what I relayed to everyone at the last mayor's forum shook him because he's worried about the town of Jerome, if we will survive or not. And that's when I fully became aware of how my glass always tries to be half empty or half full, not half empty. Because I literally think that if we have 250 or 200 people that want to volunteer, that we will live on. Think about a town that has tourism of over 2 million people annually. Being a volunteer mayor, I do have to work to pay my bills. So I do work in the public, and I ask people, have you been to Jerome before? And then I ask them if they've gone to the Grand Canyon or Sedona. So there's 3 top destinations in all of Arizona for the last few years. Can we guess what the number 1 is? The Grand Canyon. Number 2, we're here. Number 3 is Jerome. There is millions, I mean, I don't even know, 17 million people that visit the canyon. According to Sedona's Chamber of Commerce, you guys get 3.5 million annually. I think that's way low. Jerome gets over 2 million people as visitors, not staying in STRs, just people coming through. We have very little tax base as far as revenues. We have gift shops, we have wine tasting rooms, bars. We are also really, really hit heavily in any state revenue because the state goes by the 460 people that live there and not the amount of people that we support with tourism. It's a beautiful town. Everyone comes through. We had a vacation rental, one of which was the one 7 to 10 that originally started the zoning ordinance change of trying to get a conditional use permit in the areas. It called it the $1 Million View. You can look it up, the $1 Million View vacation rental. The prices of houses went from 400 to 600 to 1 point something million. So to have that $1 Million View vacation rental, call it the $1 Million View, has really hurt Jerome. I call it a beautiful, amazing view. I try not to call it the $1 Million View.
Well, Mayor, let me ask you, how is that hurting Jerome? I'm going to be adversarial on purpose. You know I care about you. I think you're awesome. I do. I don't care. I'm not politically correct. But how is that hurting you? How is that hurting Jerome?
The sense of community, the hometown feel, the going into the local pub and not really recognizing anyone, where before SB 1350 said we couldn't regulate our vacation rentals, we had a community. We had children. We had families. I passed out cute little kitty flyers that was actually designed by a friend of mine that lives right down the street from a vacation rental. Jerome is hard to drive in. The roads are small. There's not a lot of room for cars. So people would walk up to the bar, have a few drinks, and then walk down the wrong street, show up at her house and just try to open the door. She would tell them, what are you guys doing? And they would say, we're looking for our room. And then they would say things like, do people actually live here? We didn't think people actually lived in these houses. So as far as me personally, I live in the home that I grew up in. With the economy the way that it is, my daughter had moved away to Mesa. Her apartment, every time she didn't sign a lease, they were upping her rent by $100 every month. So I have my daughter and my grandkids that actually live with me. So, 3 generations living in that same house. We added probably a third to the population of the children by adding 2 children to my home. So it's a sad thing to not see a community be a community anymore and be this beautiful little landmark up on the hill that's a hotel room. Thank you.
Thank you. This has reached a level where state leaders are now going to have to do something. There's too many cities across this state and maybe across other states in the nation that are going to have to address this. They may have been able to skirt the issue. They may have been able to hide it in some form, but not anymore. There's economic problems. There's employment problems. There are employee problems. And you can't just wipe this under the carpet anymore. Because of that, I want to now introduce Senator Mark Fincham, who, Arizona State Senator. He's from Legislative District 1, for those of you in Arizona. That's the Yavapai area, and that would be Sedona, part of Sedona, and Cottonwood and Prescott and all those things. Yavapai is a large district. It's about the size of New Jersey, for those of you wanting to know, in New Jersey. So Senator Fincham heard about this forum and asked if he could come and share some things representing Yavapai LD1. So, Senator.
Thank you, Lyle. Actually, I didn't ask, I was invited. Well, as long as I'm correcting you, this is not about bed and breakfast, because in almost every case, a bed and breakfast is owner occupied. Let's be super clear about that. This is about vacation rentals, VRBOs, Airbnb. Now, let's revisit just a little bit of history. And yeah, I have a little bit of angst over this. I was one of 2 legislators.
Is it on now?
When the bill to end local control over zoning was introduced. Who voted no? I was in the House. Senator John Kavanaugh was in the Senate. And we predicted the very thing that is happening, has happened, and is going to continue to happen. Now, I was at the very first meeting that we had with Mayor Jablow and asked the question, what's your plan? Yeah, that's what we heard. Ain't no plan. So what you're facing now is the law of unintended consequences. And I've been given to understand, I have not talked to Senator Lesko about this. She's been quoted as saying, if I'd have known the damage that this would do, I never would have introduced it. That sounds like Debbie. She's the kind of person who stands up and says, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And I think with some of the facts that are coming forward today and that are going to be coming forward, that's an important thing to remember. So let's revisit property rights for just a moment. And this is foundational to the plan that you are going to have to develop as a group. You want to fight this? You're probably going to have to come together. Because if you try and do it by yourselves, you're going to be viewed as that person standing on the street corner just screaming at the wind. It's not going to work, okay? That's a reality of politics. It is a team sport, and you better have the best team on the field. So, in my earlier career, yes, I was a licensee with the real estate department, and for 8 years I was in the House of Representatives, took a couple of years off to fight with the Democrats over, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that. Fight with Adrian Fontes over the Secretary of State race, and now I'm in the Senate, okay? I knew that this day would come. And I believe when I stood on the floor of the House and railed against it, I talked about property rights, because I'm a property rights guy, but with every property right bundle, there is also a bundle of responsibilities, okay? Rights don't exist without responsibilities. I'll give you an example. First Amendment. Sure, you can yell fire in a crowded theater, but there's going to be a consequence to that. You have a responsibility to act appropriately, to not cause chaos. Did you know that you have a right to quiet enjoyment? Yes, that's a term of art in the legal world. You have a right to quiet enjoyment of your property. You also have a responsibility to ensure that your neighbor is able to enjoy their right to quiet enjoyment. But we don't talk about that very much. We don't talk about the bundle of responsibilities. All we hear about is, oh, this is a property rights issue. Well, I'm here to tell you this is a property responsibilities issue as well. And I think you're seeing that manifest. The other thing that, and the mayor, both mayors have touched on this, this is a big deal when it comes to apportionment. When you have a property that is not an occupied dwelling as a single family residence, doesn't count in the census. That starts at Congress and it goes all the way down to the state budget. That means when you do not have single family residences occupied by individuals that can be counted as residents, take for example the experience with Sedona. They went from what, 14,000 to 10,000? So you got a delta of 4,000 people. Magnify that across just, let's just simple math, 91 times. Same thing happening in every city. Well, of course, not Jerome, but proportionately. That's one congressional seat. That factor alone is one congressional seat. It also deals with money coming from the federal, taxpayer money coming from the federal government. And as the mayor of Jerome very eloquently spoke to, the proportion of money that comes from the state budget into a political subdivision. It's not fair, but it is fair. It goes on head count. Well, if you have transient residents, they're not counted. So I find it just stunning that it's over $1 billion annually that we are losing in just simple city revenue. Because, and I'm going to call it tax evasion, because that's what's going on here. Instead of buying up hotels or building hotels, you have institutional buyers come in and buy houses and then they turn them into mini hotels. I'm sure my good friend Jeannie Kench will be able to talk to that when she comes up to speak. We also have the affordable housing issue. I'm not going to beat that horse to death because it's already on the ground. So what I'm here today to talk to you about is bold steps toward a plan. Now, I find it interesting that this entire session, the League of Cities and Towns has not even shadowed my doorstep. Why are y'all members? You want to get their attention? You want to get them to start representing your interests? Inform them that you are withdrawing your membership for the time being until such time as they do. Now, some of you would say, oh, we can't do that. Why? Why? If they're not representing your interest, find somebody who will. Now, Kathy Senseman has done some yeoman's work on trying to pull these things together. I'm not advocating for you to hire her. But what I am telling you is if you've got an organization that is supposed to be representing your interests and they're not, fire them. Now, you've got a toolbox, and I think you probably don't even know what's in your toolbox. Everything from taxation to your own lobbying. Because here's what makes a difference in my world. If y'all showed up down at the state capitol and you were in my office, instead of sending a lobbyist, if you came to a hearing about government, about appropriations, about how government is operating, you'd be listened to. Now, yes, it's true, and I'm not going to pull any punches here. The Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate have basically killed bills. I introduced a bill this year to roll back. It was a total repeal bill. Now, somebody said, oh, well, you're never going to get that. Okay, get out of my office. I'm the glass half full kind of guy. Get out of my office. Come back when you understand that the only way to go back to the starting point is to repeal that which altered your universe. Senate Bill 1350. Great place to start. Now, I do recall when that bill was introduced, the Airbnb and VRBO people descended upon Phoenix like vultures on a carcass. They hit every single legislator, told them how good this was going to be for the economy. You're a tourism state. I didn't buy it then, and I don't buy it now, and I hate to say I told you so, but to my colleagues, I told you so. So, aside from letting the League of Cities and Towns know that you're going to be withdrawing your membership from them, what other tools do you have? You have taxation. The county can establish a new form of property to support the assessors. Did you know, and Jeannie, you're probably going to touch on this, so I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but if it's not owner occupied, it's a hotel. It's not a vacation rental. It's a hotel. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, has feathers, it's probably a duck. All right? So, did I steal your line? I'm sorry. Oh, and I didn't even know. Okay. What I'm talking about is you are going to need to pull together as a team. If you don't know everybody in the room, you better by the time you walk out that door. Because you are going to have to develop a plan, and it's going to have to be a plan of action with some bold steps. Now notice, and I used this metaphor earlier today with Mayor Jablo. Do you know that we don't use stone at the legislature? You're going to get a chuckle out of this, Mr. Speaker. We don't write things in stone, it's in paper. Why do you think that is? Because we can change it. We can alter the trajectory of 1350, bring it back, okay? Now, will that take new leadership? Perhaps. But it just so happens that both of those individuals are running for re-election. If you start applying pressure on an elected official in the direction you would like to have them go, it's a remarkable thing that happens. Suddenly they start listening. Now, if we've got an attorney general who is not going to enforce the law and who is not going to protect the private property rights of individuals, and that means look at the responsibilities that go along with it, then you've got to ask them, what are you going to do for me when you get into office? I'm not going to name any names, but the leadership in both the House and the Senate refused to hear Representative Bliss's bills, refused to hear my bill, parked him, basically put him in the icebox because they didn't want to hear it. Why? This is an assault on property rights. So I'm going to talk to you just for a moment about messaging. What you're going to have to do is engage in a psychological operation, all right? PSYOP. You're going to have to make sure that your community knows the problem. I'm not talking about the echo chamber. The 12 people that show up at your meeting and have donuts and coffee and say, we got to do something. I'm talking about the community writ large. You as leaders need to lead. That means you need to get in front of the people, not just a few, as many as possible. You got churches, you got community organizations. You need to become the evangelist for a repeal of SB 1350. You do. You need to have unity of messaging. Across all of you, you have a common, I hate to say the term enemy, common adversary. And that is unrestrained VRBOs. The whole point behind zoning was to restrict the amount of that kind of behavior, amongst many others, to do what? To protect the fabric of your community. That's why we don't put housing right next to industrial? Why we don't put mercantile next to government? Why we have areas zoned for appropriate use? Now, one of the things that's going on in Yavapai County right now is the examination of general plan. What's the general plan supposed to be for? Narrowly crafted for land use, water use, and infrastructure. Land use. Going at the general plan is one point of pressure that you can put on the county to say, your general plan should restrict, openly restrict, vacation by rentals when they're, and I'm not telling you how to do it, you're going to have to come to that conclusion your own. But for example, in Prescott, we have all kinds of hotels. I have no idea how many VRBOs we have, but I bet it's significant. Because everybody wants to live in that feeling of a house as opposed to a hotel room. Well, they have this thing called a staycation. You could stay at home. I don't say that lightly. I'm not trying to be a jerk about it. But this is our community. So, you've got the general plan. Your unity of messaging means that you have got to come to those 3 or 4 bullet points that are self-explanatory when they come out of your mouth. You shouldn't have to explain your position. In fact, Steve Bennett, the CEO of Intuit, once said, if you can't put your story on a cocktail napkin, you don't understand what you're talking about. So think about that for a minute. Economy of words is very important in this battle. Now, the Mayor Jerome, she's got it going on with her sheet here. So if you haven't got a copy of that, you need to get a hold of her and get a copy of that. That is the storyline right there. It just needs to be consolidated and sharpened a little bit. Then you've got unity of message, then unity of action. That's where all of you come together and make a point with the elected officials, your colleagues, because I know that you're leaders among your colleagues, but also at the legislature. Now, we're not totally out of session yet. We're kind of in that gray zone of a hiatus. The Senate has been ready with a budget for several weeks, and it seems the House is just finally now getting around to it. That's not a shot at you, Miss Bliss. But there has been there's every year in the budget, there is this thing that goes on back and forth between the House and the Senate. We're ready to go. But because we have not sine-died, your legislators are still at work down at the Capitol. And I happen to know that next week, Tuesday through Thursday, your legislators are going to be there, except for me. I'll be out of action. I'll be in hospital for a procedure. But everybody else will be. So I highly recommend that you make yourself a pest down there. Call to get an appointment tomorrow with any legislator that you can meet with. This is what's called a long horizon action. You are not seeing the result of it this year or next year. I hate to break your heart, but it's not going to happen next year either. Action on this probably will not happen until we have new leadership in the House and the Senate, or at least in one of the two bodies. Now understand, usually folks say that, it's the Republicans and the Democrats, they vilify each other. The Republicans will say the Democrats are the enemy. Democrats will say the Republicans are the enemy. At the legislature, those of us in the Senate, the House is the enemy. Am I right, Mr. Speaker? Roger that. Okay. Thank you for backing me up. It's a bit of a conundrum because we are two separate chambers. We've always been. It was designed that way. It was so that we hold each other accountable for bad ideas. Well, unfortunately, this is a bad idea that slipped through the screen. So if you have unity of messaging and it's tight, it has to explain what the problem is, not just to the community, but to the community leaders. And by the way, I think that there's somebody here from Scottsdale. I think, yeah, okay. All right. Think about this for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. This goes from tiny little Jerome to the sprawling expanse of Scottsdale, and nobody is exempt from this thing. Not one. Not one community. Not one city council. Not one county board of supervisors. So, unity of message. I'm going to say it again. Unity of message. You all need to be speaking the same language. Then there's unity of action. Come together as a group, pay visits to your legislative caucus. I also urge you to pull together your community groups. Have a town hall in your city that talks about VRBOs. You're going to be very surprised to see the number of people who are angry about this. Will show up to your town hall, but have something for them to do. Handwritten letters mean a lot at the legislature. Emails, not so much. Phone calls that are not threatening, those never go well. But phone calls asking accountability questions. My mom taught me before she passed away, the number one question that anyone can ask is why. It's a one-word question. The reason it's so offensive to so many people is because it holds somebody accountable. Why did you let that happen? Why did you not compel your leadership to hear that bill? Why? You can come up with your own questions. But when you have legislators that start getting a dozen phone calls a day from the same people asking the same questions, it may sound tedious, but I'm telling you, it does make a difference. Asking for a meeting with the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, they're probably going to say no. Does that mean you stop? Anybody? No, you do not. And my last comment is going to be a Chinese proverb, nationalist Chinese, not communist Chinese. Talk does not cook rice. It's true.
That's good.
You're in for rodeo. It's going to be rough, but I think the people are on your side. And I'm not talking about the people from BlackRock and Vanguard. I'm talking about your neighbors. This little piece, please, did you give one of those out to everybody? Okay. That's a brilliant piece. You should probably copyright that, I'm thinking. Yeah. That's a brilliant piece, but have it come from your own community. And make sure that you embrace this as a message. We want to repeal the law that took away our right to protect our communities through zoning. That's about as simple as it gets. Get as many of your constituents to repeat that same message over and over and over again. Now, it may be 3 or 4 years before we actually get action on this. I'm going to introduce it again, and then I'm going to let the Senate President know, you need to hear this bill. You need to hear what's behind this bill. Vote it down if you will, but you vote it down at your own peril. All right? If you want to get a hold of me, my phone number is 520-808-7340. Please text me. Don't just call, because I don't answer phone calls from numbers that I don't know.
Stay there.
Text me and tell me who you are. All right? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, I don't know which microphone's working now. Am I on? Thank you. Representative Bliss, if you'll come up and join us. I I'm grateful that the senator took time out traveling to do just this and speak to you. Is this working now? Is that good? Okay. Don't ask me how to do this stuff. Is it on?
Senator Fincham,
Yes?
this
know if
is
this is working yet.
Supervisor Kate Brophy McGee. May I ask you a
Oh,
question?
you got it?
Sure.
You did a wonderful job of outlining the
needs it.
process for contacting your
Okay.
legislator.
Just hold tight. Hold tight
I
for a second.
note that with the last modification, or with the Mesnard modification, which provided some enforcement tools, the cities and towns agreed to step away from the issue for 5 years. Would it be possible to make, as part of your budget yes vote, a revocation of that agreement that took place in 2022? It was on SB 1168, and they did provide for some enforcement mechanisms. I checked with my Paradise Valley folks, and they've been able to largely address it. But these other towns, particularly the smaller towns that are totally overwhelmed, where their own population is outnumbered, by those visitors, is it possible to start with that step as opposed to a total repeal? Thank you, sir.
Anything is possible, madam. I'm not the one that's a member of the League of Cities and Towns. These people in this room are. Now, when it comes to an appropriation by the state, we don't have any money. We're going to probably be a zero-based budget this year. But I would start with getting the attention of the League of Cities and Towns, because they are not speaking up for these folks. Nothing speaks attention like, we're going to curtail our membership until such time as you represent our interests. Now, that might just be spurred by a letter saying 90 days from now we're going to exit our membership if we don't start seeing some help. So because I'm not a member of that organization, because I am not in the executive branch, obviously, I don't enforce this stuff. These are the individuals in this room, and you yourself, madam. If you want to pursue that, I urge you to do that. But again, I go back to unity of messaging, unity of action. Now, if you've got a particular perspective, Supervisor, if you got a particular perspective and a thought on a mechanism to help these folks, I would highly recommend that you communicate that to Mr. Rapaki so that he can distribute it through the entire group.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you and welcome back from segment 1 of Arizona Today. We're now moving into the second segment, and I'd like to lead off with the mayor from Bisbee, Arizona, Mayor Budge, and he's on Zoom. I think I'm saying this correctly. I'm not technologically great. People know that. Everybody says, Dr. Lyle, leave the cameras and leave the computers alone. I don't know why, but I know how to cut and paste. But other than that, I have people, if you know what I mean. So, Mayor Budge, if you're ready, would you please share what's on your heart? Because I know from having heard a little bit that Bisbee, Arizona is having a very similar problem to what we've listened to already, correct?
Absolutely. We just did a housing study where 9% of our homes are Airbnbs. However, in our historic district of Old Bisbee, it's over 20%. So that's really the tourism draw. What has affected us, of course, is a lot of these homes are not locally owned. A lot of them are by corporation for investments.
I need a cigar.
The other ones are out-of-town owners that don't seem to really care much about the upkeep of their homes. I have a fourplex right next to me that works as a Airbnb. The other day, we're in number 2 fire restrictions where we don't allow anything. You know how we're also dry here in Bisbee right now, praying for our rain. The owner that is out of California leaves firewood and a fire pit. So I go outside and there's this fire pit going against right out in their yard, right next to a dead, unfortunately, tombstone rose that they didn't take care of, so it died. So these are the kind of issues that are a problem. And so, as actually a member of the executive committee of the league, I've been pushing for a long time to get a little better enforcement. We have gone full bore on the amount of what the state has allowed us to do on licensing and making sure they're fire protected. Our fire inspector goes and inspects every one of them. We also make sure everything else would be safe for them with proper heating and air conditioning and so on. The problem is we can't find them all. We've gone and to some private agencies that will help us find them and list them. However, that costs a lot of money for a small town like ours. And what I would like the legislators to look at is can they pass something that would give some enforcement within the Airbnb company that they would have to list the permit that our cities put out. We have a permit number, but our Airbnbs are not required to put that on the list. Secondly, if you try to find an address for an Airbnb, you cannot. It just pops up as a circle. So unless you want to spend hours and hours and take a picture, they hope they show you a picture where you can find this Airbnb, you don't know whether they're registered with the city or not. This control issue becomes a very, very high priority for us because we think under local control, we can understand what we can do to help alleviate the problems. Number-wise, I just cannot see a state law that says so much district between, so much area between every Airbnb. For Bisbee, we live in a canyon and we have Airbnbs stacked on top of each other. What we need to do is have local control so that we can look at our zoning laws and say, you know, this Airbnb doesn't provide parking, it's a problematic situation. We need local control, a state law that oversees and puts down these regulations. May fit for Prescott, may fit for Jerome, will not fit for us, may fit for Sedona, whatever. Let us do the job that we're elected to do. We're elected to take care of our own cities. So just pass a bill that says local control is allowed and these are what is allowed for them to do, that the Airbnb company has to have a place on their website that shows the permit numbers. They have to inform the cities of the addresses of where they're located. That's really the bottom line, is give us the tools necessary to handle the situations in our local town. And I'll take a little exception here. The bottom line is, from you legislators, you know, you put a lot of the responsibility on us to step up and all of our citizens and get us all out there to make. What is wrong with the legislators representing the people that they represent, the locals, not the Airbnb companies, not the lobbyists that pay for them to go with them. So get back into the basics of who you represent, which is the citizens that elected you and the people that need residence and where to live. So as far as the ADU goes, we passed the law in our town before the state passed it, but we had a 30-day restriction on it. That's all we need, is just added 30-day restrictions on minimum for rental on the ADU, and that takes care of that problem. A simple little bill to run. That's all I've got to say tonight, and I appreciate you having this forum so that we as mayors can bring these things forward. Thank you.
Mayor Budge, thank you very much. I'm not politically correct and I'm not running for anything. So it doesn't really matter. You can always hit delete when I say something. Mayor, thank you for your candor. One of the things that I'm looking up here, I should probably be looking back that way. You're probably up here looking at my back now. But one of the things that I miss is seeing elected officials stand up and represent we the people. And I appreciate you in this room who are taking time out to do just that. I'm not being superfluous. You're in a jam. From what I understand, 40 cities, 41 maybe, out of 91 cities in Arizona are facing serious problems. You're hearing little bits of it here. And I pray after this forum, Mayor Jablow and others in this room, you'll get together and you'll really sit down without cameras, without microphones, and really chalk out something, because you're the chief executives of your communities, and there's a lot of people who are going to be and are already impacted by what's taking place. Mayor Dent, come on forward. I'd like to introduce now the mayor of Williams, Arizona, who I had the privilege of meeting at the last mayor's forum, and I asked him last night, you've got to come back here today. He's busy. He's a mayor and he's busy. He's playing golf also. Let me just share that with you, okay? It's my show. I get to say anything I want. I'm not. But now you correct me. I know I won't be able to go back to Williams for a while, but I asked this mayor to please share candidly, not politically, what's going on in your city, very similar to Jerome, the mayor of Jerome, and what we're on here, the mayor of Bisbee, what he just said. And this mayor said, yes, I'll be glad to come down and speak. So microphone's yours, and I appreciate your time. Thank you. I think that's ready to go. Is it?
It's interesting to hear other mayors speak, and some of the things that I'll talk about a little bit will cover some of the same areas. Like the mayor of Jerome, I was born and raised in Williams. Actually, I'm fourth generation in Williams. I'm not living in the same home I grew up in, but I'm still very much proud of the home or the town that we have. Williams has a population of about 3,250 people. And when you talk about homes that are not owner occupied, during the big rush of Californians getting out of California over the last 10 years, over a 5-year period, we built 500 new dwelling units in Williams. And when the new census came out, our population went up by 250. Because those dwelling units, an awful lot of them are not owner occupied. They're either second homes, which were very popular for second homes for people off the river to get out of the heat, or the vacation rentals, short-term rentals. When I first became mayor in 2023, one of the first meetings I got to have was with HUD. The Arizona director of HUD came to Williams to talk to the city manager and I. And he informed us that our HUD housing program was classified as what they called a troubled housing program. And I was a little shocked to hear that. We started asking, what are the problems? Well, there were some administrative problems that were very minor, but the biggest problem was that our Section 8 housing, our landlord housing program, was less than 50% being used less than 50%. We were qualified to have 50 vouchers, and for years, to my knowledge, we always used the vouchers and had landlords on a waiting list and had people that wanted to use the vouchers on a waiting list. We had dropped below 50%. So I told him I take a lot of pride in our HUD housing. I think there's a need for it. There's a population that needs that. And I said, we're going to get to work and we'll get this fixed. Well, the more I looked into the problem, the reason that we'd lost so many vouchers, not because of anything our HUD people or our people were doing, the landlords were kicking people out of HUD housing and turning those homes into vacation rentals. Lots of times it was a new owner who bought it and said, you're done, you've got to move. And so at that time, we were at 24 landlords that we still had on the program and people using the program. We still have a waiting list of people that would like to rent a home. We just don't have landlords anymore. So in looking into this, we realized this problem had been creeping for a number of years, and it's all because of the short-term rentals and the growth of short-term rentals in our community. And it was not a problem. It's not a problem that we were going to be able to fix because the number of short-term rentals is growing and has been since then. At that time, we were like at 24. We're down today to 16 landlords left. So, and the other problem with that loss of the number of vouchers, you get paid by HUD to operate your HUD housing program based on the number of vouchers you're using, not what you're qualified for. So our HUD, the revenue to run our HUD housing program, which not only includes the landlord, the Section 8 part, but a public housing unit that we have that's 30 people, we used to have enough revenue to pay for a director and a maintenance person and a half-time person to do the accounting. We now no longer have money to pay any of those people to run our HUD housing program. We finally realized that we were not going to be able to fix this program, and HUD has a lot of crazy rules. We just couldn't give those vouchers to another community. It's taken 2 years, but as of July 1st, Flagstaff will take over our 50 vouchers, and they will service the few landlords left in Williams and anybody that can find a landlord later. But our Section 8 program will become part of Flagstaff program. Then we will have to take our public housing, which now there's not revenue to run that without the Section 8 program, and hopefully either be able to transfer that to Flagstaff, or at some point we may be faced with having to shut it down because the loss of those units. So we have about 1,500 housing units in Williams now. We have, I believe, just right at 225 short-term rentals. We've tracked them hard. When the state allowed us to go, we made them buy a business license. We make sure they have a state tax license because they're supposed to be collecting the taxes that they're supposed to collect. We make them do a fire inspection. We make them post on the outside of the home the contact number for someone who can come in an emergency, and also a contact number for an owner if you don't have somebody that can respond within 24 hours. People do not come forward to volunteer to sign up for these. You got to go hunt them out, and we've worked hard to try and find those. I put an article in the newspaper and told people, if you're tired of the vacation rental next to you, let us know. At least we'll make them get registered. We'll make them get licensed. If you have problems with them, our police department will follow up. We wrote our ordinance so that if we have continuous problems with an owner, we can cancel their license, get rid of them. And tracking down owners is hard because in our town, 80% of the short-term rentals are owned by someone out of Williams. 80% of them. They are corporate owners. They're investment buyers. My daughter just had a new one created next to her, and it's an investment buyer from Flagstaff who knows how good the investment is for a short-term rental in Williams, so she bought it to make money on. We have a realtor. You talk about the Realtor Association. We have a realtor who lists homes based on their income potential, not how nice a home it would be for a family to live in, but what income it could generate. I mean, that's how solid the short-term rentals are in Williams. My concern is, and when I spoke in Prescott at the mayor's forum there, I said I would like for the legislature to give us some sort of cap, maybe 10% of your housing stock, maybe 5%, whatever that number is. That wouldn't stop, we wouldn't be able to immediately go back to that. It would have to happen through attrition, but it would stop the growth of this thing because this thing is still growing fast. And it's growing fast in a lot of communities. Where we've got, I believe, 16% of our housing stock now, some of you are going to get there pretty quick because people are buying these as investment homes. I had a gentleman from Yuma who got very upset with me when we tracked him down and told him he was going to have to get a license. And he found my phone, which is public number, a city phone, and called me a lot of names and said I didn't have a right to ask him because this wasn't a business. he only rented it 30 or 40 days a year. It was a home for his family to be able to come and get out of the heat in the summertime. And I said, if you rent it one night, it's a business. You don't understand, it is a business. And you have neighbors on both sides of you who are very upset because you rent it a lot of times to golfers. It borders our beautiful golf course. You rent it to golfers and there'll be 12 of them in there in a home that should only have 6 people in it. They take up their parking, they make noise, all the rest of the things. I said, even though you don't think it's a business, it is a business. You are going to get it licensed and you will get it done. So they don't volunteer. We've had to take an actual attorney out of Las Vegas to court. He just ignored us to the point we finally had to take him to court. And the judge told him, if you do not follow through with all the things that are required on that permit within the next week, you will be going to jail. So it is hard to find them. It is hard to locate them. But if you let your community know that you want to do something about it, they'll back you up. We've done everything that we can to try and deal with them. We work hard with them. You know, the problems, Lyle had asked a question, I believe, of what they do to your community. When you lose that many homes out of a community like Williams, you lose the people that used to make up your Rotary Club. Our Rotary Club used to have 35, 40 strong members. Now they have a hard time keeping 15 members active because we've lost that many people. Our volunteer fire department, I was very proud of it. I was a volunteer fireman for almost 20 years. Our volunteer firemen always had 20 to 25 volunteers and a top-rated volunteer fire department in the state. We finally got where we can't get enough volunteers because of the people we've lost living in our community, that we're having to hire paid firefighters because there's not enough people volunteering to keep our rating and the things that we do. You lose the fabric of your community when you lose your Rotary Club or the Kiwanis group or the things like that. And it's hard to lose those and see your community affected. And that's why when I have somebody tell me, well, it's a private property rights issue, I think when the private property rights of enough people in a community start to adversely affect the whole community, we should have the right to do something. We should be able to stand up and say enough is enough. And I think that's where I feel like the legislature needs to listen, and the issue that we need to take to them is that this needs to stop. It needs to at least put a cap on it where it is, at least let us figure out what we can do locally to deal with this. And I realize our numbers maybe are a little higher. We are a tourist town. We love having tourists come to our town. And the short-term rentals can run a long season there because we have the Polar Express, which is very popular. So these things are full clear through December. So I realize it's a great investment for people, but I think their investment begins to hurt our total community, and we need to be allowed. That's the message that we need to take to the legislature, that they need to listen to, is that we need to get our communities back before we lose them completely. We just hired, somebody mentioned that they had to go to a 15-mile limit for their fire and police chief. We just hired a fabulous new police chief who came from Yavapai County. Great man. Thank you. I told several of them, I don't apologize for hiring him. He is fabulous. He's great. But we had to allow him for the first time to be our first chief of police that didn't have to live in the city limits, because there's no homes there. The homes that are there, when you have a realtor selling homes based on the value that they can produce, the revenue they can produce, the average person is trying to buy a home can't compete with that number, because that number takes them completely out of the market. We have homes that 10 years ago would have been a $250,000 or $300,000 home that a family could buy and live in, 1,600, 1,800, 2,000 square feet. Those homes now are $450,000 because of the revenue they can produce as short-term rentals. So we do need to be allowed to do something. And when Lyle was talking about some of the stories pulling at your heartstrings, if you read the Community Alliance literature that she passed out today. In there, there's a letter, and it says it's a letter from a Williams resident. And when I read that letter in Prescott, I told her, I said, I know exactly who this girl is. She's 5th generation in Williams. And she talks about the home that her grandmother had, the home that she grew up in that her mother owned, have both been sold, and are both now VRBOs. The neighborhood she lives in, and I'm standing thinking about looking on her porch, there's vacation rentals in almost every direction around her. Within a block, there's 8 or 9. And that's a small area. She's so frustrated with what's happened to her town that she and her husband, and he's also a long-term family, been there a long time, are selling because Williams is not the place it was before. When you start losing those people, that's the fabric of your community, and that's what's happening with short-term rentals. And we need to be allowed to do something. We need to press hard with whatever we can. I think, I don't know how many of you are Republicans. I'm a Republican, and I've got 2 candidates that want to be our governor already want me to sign their petitions online. Well, what I really want to know is what they think about local control. I want that answered from anybody that I'm going to vote for in the next election. I want to know how they feel about local control, because this is a local control issue. It should be given back to us to control, and it should be done. And I don't want to argue with the legislatures how we do that. It just needs to happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your candor, as we have already seen here today. My next guest is the assessor. I don't, what is an assessor? Do they like 2 and 2 is 4? Is that they know how to count, don't they? See, to me, 2 and 2 could be 3 or 5. That's why my wife does the checkbook, not me. But is the assessor from Mojave County, Jeannie Kentz. Come on up, Jeannie. I'm really excited that Jeannie agreed to come over from Mojave County, all the way from Kingman, and share with us what is the assessor doing. First of all, what do you do? It's not a mayor, okay? And also, how is this impacting assessors? We have other assessors in the audience. How is the bed and breakfast issue that you've been listening to, and we've all been talking about, how is this impacting your office? Okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Hello, everybody. Well, it's affecting us assessors in a lot of ways. You've all seen the values go up, and we're the bad guys, right? Well, we have to assess values by market. So when they're selling a house $50,000 more than they're asking for because it pencils out for the short-term rental investor, then the market goes up, and it keeps going up. And that's a problem. It's causing problems for our constituents as well. We have, as the mayors have discussed, not enough inventory. I'm from Lake Havasu. I actually live in Lake Havasu, and not a lot of inventory with 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes because they're cheap enough for the investors to pencil out really well, and that then takes those homes out of the market for renters, firefighters, teachers, and so forth that they can afford. The home that used to be $250,000 to $350,000 that most teacher can afford is now $650,000, and it's because of market and supply and demand, because there's not enough there, so then the price goes up even more. So those are one of the issues that we're having to deal with assessors. What's very important to us is we take an oath as assessors. We take an oath to be fair and equitable, and what we're finding out is we can't do that. We actually cannot commit to that fair and equitable because the motels and the hotels are acting a certain way with transient rentals all year long. They're commercial, but we cannot classify the homes that are doing the same darn thing as commercial. Now, let me rephrase that. We probably can do it. It's not in the law that we can't, and it's not in the law that we can. So the problem is that no assessor really wants to go out there and start doing it unless everyone's going to be on board, unless the legislature says it's okay, because otherwise we're going to end up having the BlackRocks of the world in court with us. So what we're trying to attack as assessors is the classification, not the regulation. I know the mayors are looking at regulation. They're looking at things that they can do to make it better for the neighborhood. I know we've had short-term rentals in Lake Havasu for over 20 years, and it's been okay until it got out of hand, and now it's not okay because they should have continued with the local control. We were doing just fine with our local control until we were told that we can't. But for us assessors, we have to value in current use. And if they're using that home like a motel year-round, and I'm not talking about the ones that are just, like the snowbirds coming out, right? And then maybe they rent it to the boaters half the year, or even any other rental that is not all the time, full-time, all year, throughout the year. We really should be able to value those and classify them as commercial. We got a bill that was written by John Gillette, my representative. It was a fantastic bill because it was simple, it was easy, it was one line. And basically what it was doing was allowing us as assessors to be able to classify those homes that are acting like motels as commercial. Not even got into committee, couldn't even be heard. They stopped it before the gates even opened. And I don't understand that because it was easy, it was simple, and it was allowing us to do the job that we're supposed to be doing as assessors, and that is valuing in use, in current use. This is something a little different, and a little different way to get through it, but we need to attack this horse. We need to attack this problem in multiple ways, and I think if we look at that classification, it's good. It's not a partisan thing at all. I'm conservative, yes. I don't want to raise anybody's taxes, but it's only fair that if they're acting like a motel, and as, what was the mayor that had said earlier, oh, hi, Kate, even though the mayor that had said earlier that they're a business, they're taking an income. We also have to be careful because there's a difference between zoning and classification. So even though we classify it as commercial, it doesn't mean it needs to be in a commercial zone. Does that make sense? I want everybody to understand there's two different babies here. And the cities can decide how they want to do that for their commercial areas, but all I'm doing is classification. And it'd be no different than if somebody had a house and they had a business out of their house, right? I can classify half of their house as commercial if I wanted to, and I can do it that way. But it doesn't have anything to do with zoning. So we're trying to attack it a different way, a way that I think that we should be able to value these homes as they are. It's really causing problems, not only for the young families, but it's also causing problems for those. I have a constituent that lives on the Colorado River up in Fort Mojave, and she's lived there for almost 20 years. She lost her husband about a year ago, and she's realizing she has to move out of the home that they built together because the value has gone up so high. Because these big black rocks are finding these big houses right on the river that have 5 and 7 bedrooms, and they're filling them with people, and it pencils out fantastic. And they're buying them up way higher than they should as far as value is concerned and price. And then this poor lady that's on the river too, and yeah, she's on the river and it's nice, but she can barely afford living in that house anymore. On top of the fact that everybody constantly is harassing her and having the issues that come with the party houses that are right next door. So as assessors, we have been trying. We've tried, started this in 2020. Armando the assessor Ruiz from Coconino County worked really hard to try to get a bill passed, I think twice. Yeah, he gave me a list here, 2020 and 2022. And politics made it where it never even was heard. I think we had one heard in committee and then it dropped, right? And then they didn't even want to hear John Gillette's was really simple, and it didn't even want to hear it. So we're hoping, and I think we have the support of all of our assessors, and we'll do whatever we can to get this door open. I don't want to say it's going to take 3 to 4 years like Mr. Fincham had said. I want to get something done this next year. And even if we just take it a little bit at a time, this is such an easy bill as far as I'm concerned, because it's only fair. It's only fair. And if the community, see, everybody benefits if they get valued and classified as commercial. Everybody benefits. The whole town benefits. The whole county benefits because we're getting a little bit more money and to pay for the things that cost to have these short-term rentals. And so it's just fair. And so this is the fair bill that I hope that we can get through, hopefully this next year. And again, we have the support of ACO, we have the support of our assessors, our AAO committee. Community is really, they all understand, even though their county might not be affected as much, they understand how it's important for us too. So if there's any questions.
Any questions for the assessor?
On that little booklet that's going around from the Arizona Neighborhood Alliance, Susan Edwards has done a beautiful job putting a bunch of stuff together. Please grab one of hers. I appreciate everything she does. She is a numbers person more than I'm a numbers person. Yeah. So
She's in the back.
yeah, she's in the back, but you can ask her. She's got those numbers up here.
Thank you.
She'll send it to you digital. Absolutely. Save a tree. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jeanette. It's always nice to hear from an assessor, isn't it? I mean, okay, we had mayors and supervisors and kings and governors and stuff, but assessors, that's important. So you're the only one who got applause too, an assessor. So if you move to Mojave County, she will assess you very nicely. Is that correct? All right. Nobody laughed. It's a long day, isn't it? All right, I'll work on my delivery. Jim Rounds, come on down, Jim Rounds. Jim Rounds is a consultant and a specialist, subject matter specialist in what? In everything. And I stopped him out here in the bus station and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Waiting for a bus." I said, "Well, you want to come into the mayor's fair and be a specialist?" He said, "Sure, why not?" This is a specialist in income, right?
Economics,
real estate, transportation, and breakfast,
policy.
Cooking and stuff.
I enjoy the shuttle going back and forth.
The shuttle, that's right.
Very good
I've seen you
participation.
drive it also at times.
I volunteer.
So, Jim's waited all day, and I really appreciate it. But I did this on purpose, and so you can be mad at me, not anyone else. He is an economic specialist, and I wanted to hear at the end of the day here, with all of the problems and all the mayors and all the issues and assessors who are talking about the economic impact of this, I wanted to hear from you because you are a specialist in economic affairs and also what's taking place with these bed and breakfast issues. Am I correct?
The STR issues, yes.
I always say it wrong. But it's my show. I get to do what I want.
We gotta make fun of you.
Absolutely.
We gotta make fun of you, so it's okay.
Right, and I've got your address. I know where you live. So thank you, Jim, for being here. I did this purposely to end with a economic and a specialist because this is an economic issue. You all know that. You're all dealing with it as mayors and county supervisors. So I thought, let's bring in somebody who can really talk economics. So thank you very much for taking time and being here today. Thank you. Jim?
Hello, everybody. A lot of you don't know me. My company does a lot of advising at the state capitol. We have advised governors, the legislature, both houses, mayors throughout the state. One of our clients is actually the League of Cities. Another one, I'm a senior fellow with the Goldwater Institute. The reason that I like to have this diverse profile is because the best way to implement good public policy is to be able to talk to people across the political aisle. It just does not work anymore if you're known as a Democrat economist or a Republican economist. I use math. And on occasion, I'll do the calculations and I'll prove that 2 + 2 = 4. And a lawmaker will say, no, during caucus that we decided it was 5. And then we negotiate, and when we discover that they're willing to accept 4.25 and the bill pass, then 2 + 2 = 4.25. Doesn't matter how you got there. What matters is that the bill with good public policy got made. The reason that this is a joke is that it's also not a joke, because I've been witness and been participant in things that are far sillier than what you just heard. And I was originally going to talk about the research that we were doing on the Sedona short-term rentals. There's not a lot of time, and we've covered a lot of different topics, and a lot has already been said on issues that have to be fixed. But what we learned on the Sedona short-term rental analysis is that every community is going to be different. So we went into this anticipating that Sedona was going to be the poster child for short-term rentals. Well, yes, prices have gone up. It has caused some economic problems. But at the same time, short-term rentals can't just be seen as a separate public policy topic by itself. We ended up talking about workforce. Can we continue to extract workers from outside the area? So of course Sedona would have to go into Verde Valley, get cottonwood workers. That just happens sometimes. But that's not going to be an opportunity for everybody. And so even if you identify with an individual community, and we do have some short-term rental legislation, each community might require something different. And so, for example, one of the recommendations was, let's try to invest a little bit more in the shuttle going from Cottonwood into Sedona, because if it's every hour and somebody might be waiting to get on and they can't get on because that particular one is full, that's very difficult to explain to your boss why you're an hour late. Well, there may be some grants that are available. The legislature and the governor always talk about housing affordability. How can we invest properly? What we did is we converted everything into return on investment, because lawmakers will say, run government like a business. All right, well, if you invest $1 in the shuttle and it increases economic activity where it generates an extra $2 in revenue, that's something that a business would invest in, a positive ROI. That got through to a lot of people when we had to get healthcare related public policy passed to support universities, education programs, and now we're using it for a lot of the economic development programs that we look at. So yes, we can maybe have some legislation that corrects some deficiencies, but the solution will be different. So, for example, if you do the math for Sedona specifically, an individual or a home that is rented 50% of the time, short-term rentals, and keep in mind the math works this way because when you're on vacation, you spend between 5 and 10 times more than you would normally spend in a week. You're not out there doing a pink jeep tour every single week if you live in Sedona. But if you're vacationing there for a week, you might do that. You go out to eat more on vacation. Well, it turned out that Sedona actually made more money with half occupancy of some of these homes rather than full occupancy of individuals that spend less. Now we go back to the more complicated matter. If we got rid of the short-term rentals and the $1 million or the $900,000 average home price dropped to $800,000 or $750,000, that's still not affordable to the typical worker. You need $215,000 a year to afford the $900,000 home at a relatively high percentage of your income being spent on housing. When the average income of the workers is $40,000, there's going to be a persistent problem that goes beyond. So how do we balance coming up with a solution where every single community is going to be impacted differently? How do you impose new regulations, or we talk about rollbacks and then there's potential lawsuits? Let me talk about one more thing. Arizona is a hotbed for real estate investors compared to most other communities. Do you know why that is? Two particular reasons. One, we do not have a state property tax. The same home in Arizona versus Texas, where my in-laws live, they pay 4.5 times what we pay for a very similar home. And we're a growth state. That attracts more investors than normal, so we're disproportionately impacted. So how do we go through when we're not going to implement a statewide property tax? But how do we go through and fix some of these issues where we let economics first take care of it, because then you can't get sued on it? Then you get into what do we, like what you were bringing up, what do we get into where we have to have some specific recommendations? One of the things I feel the most strongly about, and this gets back to where you get pushback from conservative lawmakers, is there needs to be a separate property tax class for short-term rentals. A separate class keeps it from being an issue where you're raising taxes. Is that like the hook for me to get pulled off? Separate property tax class sounds conservative, it sounds left-leaning. Is it though? I run a small business. We've analyzed small business issues all over the state. We even used a small business analysis when that California income tax increase proposal came in. That was our main argument. We're the ones that did the math on that. Everybody bought into how it was going to impact small businesses. I have to pay taxes because I run a business that are different than if I was just working out of my home and not reporting it. It's a disservice to every hardworking small business owner in the state to have certain classes of small businesses, which is what the STRs, not have to operate like it's a business. That's how you talk to the conservative policymakers. You explain to them, we're not talking about just creating additional taxes. We're talking about you supporting small businesses. Do you want to be a small business supporter, yes or no? If you say no, then you'll be on the list of not being a small business supporter. I don't care. The great thing about being a consultant is I can't get fired. I can get fired from a project, I can't get fired from the business. A lot of our colleagues in economic development and public policy that work for state agencies are more at risk. They can't make statements like this. But groups like this can put together packages. During this time that I was waiting to go up, and it was a great discussion, so I'm actually glad that I'm going last, just brainstorming with my friend Kathy. We already have 10 different ideas on how can we maybe make this advance to the next legislative session. Right now, it's too late for this legislative session, but we're early for the next one. I don't think it's going to take that long. Now, in terms of being an advisor for the League of Cities, timing is everything. Tomorrow, I'm having lunch to talk about whether or not the individual communities need to be proactive with a housing bill this year. So rather than wait for some regulations to be imposed on the local government entities and then playing defense, what if we put together the perfect housing package and then have that introduced early and have that one of the first bills that's adopted? Well, if that's the case, short-term rentals is definitely part of that package. It may have to be separate. And the reason I want to talk to the lawmaker that was sitting next to my friend Andy is I have to give you my card because I want to brainstorm a little bit on some of the ideas that we have where I was given a briefing on your prior bills, and it's not just having an idea, it's the right time of the idea, and then it's how you tell a story. So I can do all the math that I need to, but I need a partner like Kathy, lobbyist, to be able to help tell the story that we put together. Then we have to follow up on it. And then we have to have lawmakers take responsibility, not just for the yes votes, but for the no votes as well. If they implement one of the many things that we've worked on since the Great Recession, created tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs, well, that's wonderful. But if you hold economic development back, they need to take ownership of the losses. And that's not bullying, it's just telling facts. We're not recommending anything that isn't just a basic fact. So the short-term rentals is something that we have to work on. I am so grateful that I got to work with the mayor, who is just, I have a hard time sometimes with certain lawmakers where when we talk on the phone, I say, hello, Mr. Mayor. Most of the time I forget, and it's like, hey, Scott, how's it going, man? It's a little bit different, but I really appreciated the chance to work on this because this opened up my eyes on just doing the Sedona report. A lot of the findings from the Sedona report are going to apply to Jerome as well and others, but there's also limitations on the other communities. So if we can do this extra property tax class and we can have that threat of the additional costs, what do you think is going to happen to those properties? They're going to be sold. Economics is going to create the sale, not government action, other than fairly imposing a tax on them that should have been done already. And the legal defense is that it's not a tax increase, it's a late tax, an appropriate adjustment after the fact. And there's a big difference in the legal argument. And whenever you deal with these, you got to deal with the legal arguments and you got to deal with others. But the fact that we were doing a short-term rental discussion and we got into transportation issues with the shuttle, another issue that you would think would have nothing to do with it is one of the things that we're doing on the education side is government buildings and schools that have excess capacity have limits, and we found out through working with Sedona staff, have limits on renting out their properties at below market rates. What we want to do statewide is to have this availability to the school districts so that they can use a discounted rental rate for their property if they're not using like a kindergarten or first grade. It's already an infrastructure set up for a daycare. Now we have discounted daycare for teachers and other people, which is a $200 or $300 a week subsidy to their income. We have additional transportation subsidies that have a 5-to-1 ROI in terms of providing workers to different areas. We're making money for taxpayers if we do this right. That's why you bring in that business component and you say, let's actually implement something that's efficient. So the STR went all the way to daycare and then other issues, and the report will be out probably in the next couple of weeks, but the reason that it's more dynamic than the original scope, and we kept saying we need to add this to the scope. We didn't ask for more money, so I don't want you to think that was the reason. We kept adding to the scope because new things kept coming up. When we talk about short-term rentals, it impacts other things in economic development. That's the hook. You don't just have a short-term rental bill. You have a bill that brings short-term rentals into a broader reform package that might have to do with housing. It might have to do with well-being of low-income individuals. It could have a lot of different things that will get those last lawmakers to vote yes. And what I'll close with is when we deal with lawmakers, there's a third that are not going to like your idea regardless of what it is. There's a third that are going to vote yes for your idea regardless of what it is. It's the middle third that you have to get to. But you get to them by educating them, providing stats, telling a story, and making them feel comfortable so that they can talk to their colleagues that might be opposed to it and be enabled to say, I'm supporting this because it's right and I believe in the math. And so, yes, as an economist, I'd love to say it's all about the math. That's a big part of it to identify what's good policy, but it's the storytelling, it's the excellent lobbying like people, like Kathy will provide. So don't be discouraged. Don't write off the League of Cities yet. There still could be some opportunities. And when the report comes out, take a look because a lot of the issues are going to be foundational to whether it's Bisbee or Jerome or others, but we have to have everybody on the same page on what we want to do, and then we go down there like an army. And when I started at the Capitol out of college, I thought I was intimidated because there were a lot of really fired up people. And I saw one person, I think it was Peter Burns, bang his fist on a podium. I thought that was just the coolest thing I've ever seen. I don't see that anymore. The last person that probably banged their fist on a podium at the Capitol was me. And everybody was like, what was that noise? Because they weren't listening. They were on their phones or something. And I said, that was me saying that you're not paying attention. So we have to be more bold, and that's okay. It's not being rude. Being bold is different. Now, you can push it too far, where one time I said, what you just heard made everybody in the room dumber. Let me correct what was said. The chair laughed at it, but I learned afterwards, do the mature thing. This was years ago. It was like 2 years ago, but you can still be respectful by providing facts. But you got to show up, And you gotta have a strong backbone and back up what you're doing, but it's the unity. So all that stuff that Mark talked about, except for the league issue, he nailed it on a lot of these topics. I really liked what he said. He's right. It's gotta be the messaging and everything else. So keep an eye on what my good friends in Sedona are gonna be finishing up on the short-term rentals, and let's get together somehow and put together a package, yes, as early as next year. There'll be a way of figuring out how to get funding for everybody, and let's get something done. Because if we don't, then bad things happen. When you don't bring ideas to the Capitol, that's when some of the most crazy ideas come up. And I think that's just how it works, but we can use it to our advantage. Thank you.
Good job, good job. Thank you, Jim, very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I pray you got questions answered, and I pray that you were able to ask some questions. There's a lot of work ahead here in Arizona, and not just with the communities and the counties that are represented here and on the Zoom, but across Arizona. So I hope across the nation you've also enjoyed and you've learned something. It took a lot for these mayors, county supervisors, and others to take time out to come here and to openly share. There's a problem here in Arizona, and Arizona for the last so many years has been a leader across this nation, not only in election reform and integrity, but in many other areas. And now you're seeing here leaders in a number of communities that are addressing an economic and employment and other issue through the bed and breakfast issues. So I hope across this nation we've been some help, and then also across Arizona. I pray that you've learned something from colleagues and fellow citizens of Arizona. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lyle Rapacki, and that's how I see things from Arizona today.